What is a rightist? Today I'll be answering that question. Also, I will be explaining the structure for this divide. So what we have here is just a simple political spectrum. I pulled it from Encyclopedia Britannica, showing other names for what is far right and what is far left. So you could see far left can be considered a radical, and a reactionary can be considered far right. So to answer the question of what is a rightist, this is somebody who is reactionary. This is somebody who prefers right-wing doctrine over left-wing doctrine. So you could hear different ideologies espoused to either, and it's not exactly clear where they could fall, because you can be a right-wing libertarian, you could be a left-wing libertarian, or socialist or capitalist, or whatever other specific ideology you want to pick from this. Now, is there an underpinning ethos to each of these, and why does it seem so confusing that you could pick either side? And in order to answer this question proper, I think we have to go back to the French Revolution in 1789, because this is where we have the divide start in the first place. The French Revolution. Prior to 1789, France had been an absolute monarchy. Monarchy in the sense that it was ruled by one. Absolute can be a little bit of a relative term. It's not like the king had power over all. France had a three-class system in place. So these were estates. The first estate was the clerical estate, consisting of bishops. The second estate was the aristocratic estate, people who held government positions. And then the third estate was the masses. So these consisted mainly of farmers and peasants. Not only farmers and peasants, but these had wealthy bankers and wealthy merchants also within this class. Now, what had happened was that the first two classes would align with each other a lot of times, and they would have a majority in the system. But with the French Revolution, having 98 to 97% of the population rise up against the other two classes created a whole new divide within the system. So this is how we get the left-right spectrum. To the left, we see people who value things like freedom, progressivism, egalitarianism, democracy, and secularization, while on the right, we see people who value religion, hierarchy, tradition, and an ordered society. Now, this is a tradition that we have of right and left wing. This is how we understand it. What happened also in 1789 was the Constitution went into effect in America. This is a very different story. Ultimately, 1776 would have been considered something very leftist. What happened afterwards might be considered a different story. Now, this might require another video to go over into more nuance, but for right now, we're going to stick with this traditional system that we have based on the French Revolution. Shortly after, in the 19th century, many had tried to synthesize a lot of these rightist and leftist positions. So, for example, could you have a government that was pro-religion and pro-democracy at the same time? This is just one hypothetical among many, because dozens upon dozens of ideologies happened in the 19th century. Right now, we're going to fast forward to the 20th and the end of World War I, because what we see is the fall of four major monarchies. What we are looking at here is a map of Europe pre-World War I on the left and post-World War I on the right. The most obvious detail you will notice is the empires are no more. These countries became republics. And this is a general trend that starts at this time, where monarchies are becoming anachronistic, or at least the role of the monarch is being diminished. Even to this day, England, the United Kingdom, still has a king, but they're only used in a ceremonial purpose. So the world is kind of backing away from monarchy. They're becoming more republic, they're becoming more democratic, they're becoming more of a representative state as opposed to a rule by one. Now, the big question comes for somebody on the right is, how do I promote my values within a republic? And the answer becomes more political ideologies. And this only made things more confusing. If you look at the political compass, what happened was a system was created to kind of map out the universe between rightists and leftists, and an up and down scale became authoritarian and libertarian. And this became broken once again because there was so much, even more detail you can go into this with looking at this compass. You may be used to seeing this political compass. Just to give a brief overview, to the left, we have economic policies that favor government services. To the right, we have free market principles. And up and down is the authoritarian and libertarian scale on the y-axis. This just basically means if you want a centralized government or a decentralized government. Now, this doesn't take into account for other factors that were usually part of the left-right paradigm, like if you're a nationalist or a globalist or a traditionalist or a progressive. So this scale is broken on so many levels. It also has a premise that this is operating within democratic republics. Now, there is a place for monarchies and aristocracies and older forms of government that might be considered archaic, but they usually always end up in the upper portion of the chart. Now, I want to look at another compass with more detail just to show how even more broken this could be. Now, this is just one interpretation of how each political ideology would place itself on the political compass. Observe something like anarcho-monarchism, which is to the bottom of the chart. All other forms of monarchy are in the upper right-hand quadrant. Why are they so polar opposite to each other? Shouldn't they be more similar to each other as opposed to being on the opposite end of the spectrum? Also, observe something like conservative socialism. Now, this is in the upper left-hand quadrant of the chart, but it's almost to the furthest left. How can it be conservative if it's all the way to the left? This may just be one interpretation, but it's all of the political compasses that you could look at. This scale is completely broken. What I'm proposing is to look at the value structure of what is a leftist and what is a rightist to figure out a better way to describe the paradigm. So a study was conducted to show what self-identified conservatives and self-identified liberals value. Now, in the center is things within proximity to yourself. So things like your family, your friends, and as you move outward, your neighbors, people of your country. And the further out you go, you'll have all things in existence at the very end, and then maybe you'll go back to the center to like things like rocks or animals. And what you're showing is that conservatives value things within proximity to themselves, while liberals value things away from the proximity within themselves. This study was done with about 135 people, I think. Now, this does not negate the conclusion, but this would be nice to see on a mass scale because I think this pattern would continue the same way. So based on this value structure, I think we have a way to determine what is a leftist and a rightist. These are the tenets of what's on the left and what's on the right. This correlates to that previous study. On the left, we see negative liberty. On the right, we see positive liberty. Now, we can go into a whole discussion of what's either, but I will try to truncate them and say usually negative liberty is a freedom to, and positive liberty is a freedom from. So we're going to take something like gambling. With a negative liberty, your choice is based to do something. You want to gamble. You want money. Maybe you want the thrill. On the right, we have positive liberty. So this is a freedom from. You want to be free from gambling because you do not want to be addicted to something, or maybe you want to save your money. Positive liberty usually is rooted in religion, in God, in traditions. On the left, we see egalitarianism. I chose this word for a reason, not equality, because egalitarianism sees equality as an end point, not necessarily as a start point or a midpoint or anywhere else. On the right, we have nationalism. This is based on borders. What is a nation? The borders of the land, the language, and the culture. These are in opposition to each other because of diversity. In egalitarianism, the diversity is used to be homogenized. Everything needs to be one and uniform. With a nationalism, you could have a plurality of nations. On the left, we see fraternity. On the right, we see family. Fraternity, we're going to take a look at a college frat or a union. You are expected to do something to a certain standard, or maybe you have to go through an initiation process, whereas your family, that doesn't happen. It's each to their own ability. A child cannot do something the same as a father or a mother. Now, what I mean as a rightist, yet again, is one who values positive liberty over negative liberty, nationalism over egalitarianism, and family over fraternity. Does not necessarily mean that you do not value these other things, but you value one form of tenets on one side to the other. This does not mean, oh, you're a capitalist, oh, you're a libertarian, oh, you're a socialist or whatever. This is what's meant by what is a rightist and leftist. Now, if you were to summarize each of these sides, on the left, we see things that are usually based in choice, and on the right, usually things that you're born to with. Now, I know you might be saying something like family. With marriage or adoption, you choose to do these things. Yes, but you've inherited all the traditions and even their family within a marriage or within adoption. Now they are a part of you. These things are usually inherent. Where on the left, you see things as a blank slate. Everything starts off as neutral. Everything starts off as completely formless. This is what's meant as a rightist. This is something that is in opposition to formless, because you could see things that are inherent to whatever you are talking about. Furthermore, it's not someone who is a monarchist, a Democrat, an aristocrat. You could have good government within any of the three systems, and you could also have a rightist government within any of those three forms of government.